Oh. You know what I'm saying? That's for the first 5 seconds. So when people scroll over the thumbnail with their phone, they don't know what's going on. All right. Let's have this conversation. It's Sunday. For those of us that profess faith in at least Jesus, today was a day you were probably at church. I was not, because I'm on sabbatical. But I'll be back next Sunday. But I thought, let's have this conversation. All right. This is a conversation. This is a question. It's an age-old question that has been asked, and I believe it's Satan's favorite question. All right. So let's start from the beginning. Welcome to CNN. I'm Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. All right. Let's talk Satan's favorite question. Now, before I say what this is, let me qualify what I mean by Satan's favorite question. Because I don't want to think that every time this question is asked by people that it's wrong to ask or somehow evil or people's motives are evil, right? But the question in and of itself, in many ways, is Satan's favorite question, if for no other reason, because he knows there's not really a good answer to this question. And he also knows, which many professed believers should know, is that God doesn't answer this question in the Bible. But this is a good question. Now, before I say what the question is, I want to say this, that there are legitimate reasons for asking this question. There are legitimate reasons for asking this question. And there are people who ask this question who sincerely have life circumstances that they want to know the answer to this question. But then there are people who use this question to walk away from faith or denounce Jesus, whatever it is, to just be wicked and believe in other things, all this stuff, right? So I'm going to address both sides of this question as I tell you what it is. But I believe this is Satan's favorite question because it has done the most damage, if you will, to those who profess to believe in Jesus Christ as I do. All right, here's the question. You've heard this plenty of times, and you hear all kinds of explanations. I'm going to give an answer to this question to those who ask it with hostility to disprove Christianity. I'm going to give an answer that you probably don't hear many people use this answer. And then I'm going to give an answer to those who are sincerely asking this question. All right, so what is the question, Satan's favorite question? It's this. You guys have said it, asked it, heard it, know it well. Why does either God allow evil and suffering, or some people say, well, why does a good God allow evil and suffering? It's more commonly known among philosophy and theology as the problem of evil, right? And people ask this question both from hostility to disprove God and sincerely confused at why God, who they believe to be good, would allow evil to happen. That's anything from the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, the end of some interpersonal relationship that was meaningful. So many reasons why genuine people ask it. But then there's the hostility people that ask it. Basically asking that question to throw in the face of believers that the God that we profess to be good can't be good if he allows evil and suffering. So I'm going to speak to both of those, all right? Here's the reality. Let's say this. And I said this a second ago, but let's say it again. The reality is God does not answer this question even for Job. So if you look in the book of Job, right, you get chapters 1 and 2, God and Satan have this conversation. God says, what about Job? Right? He's a righteous man. Now keep this in mind. This is important. People don't forget it. At least I don't hear people acknowledge this point. God is the one who said Job is righteous. This is God's evaluation of Job, right? So God's saying this. He allows Satan to do some things, destroy him, take his family, his cattle, his home, everything, except his wife. And then in chapter 2, he allows him to experience physical suffering, sores and pain and all of that, right? It's not until chapter 37 that God weighs in and answers, not even answers Job's question per se, but gives Job a series of questions that Job must answer, right? So keep in mind, God said that Job was righteous and wanted the Satan to test him. And yet God does not answer why he allowed evil and suffering to come upon Job's life. He asks him a series of questions like, where were you when the earth was created? Are you able to tell the ocean to come here but not further? Do you know the names of all the stars in the skies? All this, right? So to be clear, no matter what answer you give to the question of why does God allow evil and suffering, God does not answer that question. So just be clear, even with someone like Job, whom God himself said is a righteous dude. All right, having said that, let's answer this question from the hostility standpoint. Now, by that, what I mean is people who show up at events and like a Frank Turek or someone like that, right? Who's a good apologist, a William Lane Craig or somebody like that. William Lane Craig is a little bit cerebral, so you might not even realize he's answering your question when he's talking. But like when they ask this question to you or to me or someone, and they're asking it to kind of mock God, I want to answer the question first from their perspective. How can a good God, or why does your God allow evil and suffering, or how can your God be good if he allows evil and suffering? This is the answer to those who mock God. Now, here's what we typically do. We go into our best apologetics catalog. Well, God doesn't, free will, that's what we do is we go free will. We have to have free will in order, and people choose to do evil. And we give them the Acts 7, Stephen, biblical theology. Well, Adam did this and we try to walk them through. But these people, in all seriousness, while I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, do it. Do what you feel led to. But many of these people don't really care what answer you give. They're only asking you that, prompted by the enemy, because they want to try to make you and others disprove what you believe, because if God were really good, he wouldn't allow evil and suffering. This is why it's Satan's favorite question, because he knows that there's not going to be an answer sufficient for the majority of people. Now, you and I may give an answer and think, yeah, that's a good answer, because we're already people of faith, so we get it. But when you're talking to someone who doesn't have faith and they're antagonistic and they're asking this question to throw it back in your face, and they might say, yeah, this is why I don't believe in your God. I believe in the universe. I believe in science. I believe in I believe in this religion or that religion. They say all these things, right? Here's the response to people like that I think is a better response than trying to talk about free will and stuff like that. Here's what I say when I feel like this person's asking me this question because they're trying to show up and disprove Christianity. So why does your God how can your God be good if he allows evil and suffering? So I just say, so are you saying you don't believe in Christian God? No, I don't believe in. What do you believe in? I believe in science. I believe in the universe, right? Science, universe, whatever. Here's the question that I don't try to defend. Here's what I say to them after that. Well, then why hasn't what you believed in stopped evil and suffering? I presume that you believe in something that you think is better than the God of the Bible because he hasn't stopped evil and suffering. So then why hasn't what you believed in stopped evil and suffering either? Why hasn't science stopped evil and suffering, or giving a good answer for that? Why hasn't the universe stopped evil and suffering? Why hasn't your belief, if you don't believe in God, why hasn't it stopped evil and suffering? The reason why I think this is a better question than going into free will and all this with people like this is because here's the reality. There's no God that anyone professes to believe in. There's no entity, whether it's science, the universe, Buddha, Allah, Joseph Smith, your cat, Santa Claus, whoever you name, there isn't one deity or entity like science or universe that has a problem or that stops good and evil. There's none. So what I'm trying to show is, okay, well, if what you believe in instead of God has not answered the problem of good and evil and has not ended it, then why are you angry at my God then if the God or what you believe in hasn't answered it or stopped it either? You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of these questions are meant to rattle us, right? But the reality is evil and suffering exists no matter who or what you believe in. And there's no credible answer outside of the Bible that's going to be better than the Bible, right? So when I get into these conversations and the people are antagonistic and I'm not going to, listen, God doesn't need us to defend him. Now, don't get me wrong. I think scripture's clear. Always have an answer for the hope that lies within you. 1 Peter 3, right? I get it. I'm with all of that. I always have an answer. But I don't feel like I got to defend God. If you choose not to believe in the Lord, then remember this. In Mark 6, right? Jesus sent his disciples out, 72 of them. He said, go out and preach the gospel, right? This is what people don't want to acknowledge. This is what Jesus told the disciples. Go out and preach the gospel, all right? Go to all these towns. If they welcome you in, then stay with those people for the duration of your time. For the people who don't welcome you in, and if they don't reject the gospel, he says, when you leave, wipe the dust off of your feet, right? In other words, Jesus said, go out there, share the gospel. If they're not tripping, if they don't believe, wipe the dust off of your feet, keep it moving, go to the next town, right? That's biblical. So if I share with you what I believe and you don't, I'm not all broken up about it. Like I'm just going to keep moving, right? I'm just going to keep it moving. And, maybe the Lord will bring you in another way. And if not, then you're going to stand before him and have to tell him all the stuff you said to me and whoever else, right? There's a sense where I think we have to kind of push back against this notion as if there's a better answer to the problem of evil than what we get in our Bibles. Like, what answer does science give for the problem of good and evil? Science can't even explain why there's love. Science can't even understand a ton of stuff. So why am I going to defend Jesus against science or against the universe? No one has a good answer for the problem of evil. So if you are a fellow believer in the Lord like I am, and someone asks this question and you can tell, like, man, these people are just trying to show up what I believe in, then just say, hey, that's a good question. Well, do you believe in God? No. Okay, well then what do you believe in? Well, I believe in it. Okay, then why hasn't what you believe in solved the problem of good and evil? Why hasn't it answered it? Why hasn't it removed it? Oh, okay, then why are you angry at my God for not removing it? Well, because you obviously chose something that you think is better, that's good. Since my God isn't good to you, it doesn't work because there's no real good answer for the problem of good and evil. And Satan knows this. So that question, he loves it. That question has led more people away from God than to God because people think like we're supposed to be a good answer and there just isn't one. All right. Having said that, now for the people who ask this question, why does a good God allow evil and suffering? And they're genuine. I mean, these are people who lost a loved one, someone who lost a child, who got pregnant for the third time and was really hoping that this was going to go to term, and then they end up miscarrying again, and they're discouraged, or there's someone, child was kidnapped, and there are so many circumstances in which there's a genuine sadness and curiosity about this question, why does God allow evil and suffering? And if there are people of faith and they're struggling, yeah, you can go the whole route of free will and all of that. But I'm going to be honest with you. Let's just keep it 100, right? When you're really struggling with the Lord or with what's happening in your life, all that theology, free will doesn't help you. It doesn't make you be like, that's a good point. I just think we just have to recognize there's no good answer for the problem of evil and suffering. But when people are asking it genuinely, especially people of faith, instead of going the free will route, this is what I typically say. And this may not be a good answer to you, but here's the answer to that question for those who genuinely believe and are struggling, or those who aren't being antagonistic about trying to disprove what I believe in because of evil and suffering. When someone says, why does a good God, or why does God allow suffering or evil? The question that I try to explain, because it helps me get to the gospel, this is the answer that I say. I say, because he allowed his son to suffer, to experience evil. Why does God allow evil and suffering? People are asking that about us, on humanity. And I say, because he allowed his son to suffer evil and suffering. And they're like, what do you mean? And that's when you explain, like, listen, I know that it's crazy that God allows evil and suffering, but the craziest part about that is he didn't spare himself from it. Like the fact that Jesus could have chosen a number of ways to bring about salvation, but he chose traumatic means to do it. Like people act like today their trauma is so unique, but trauma is the norm. It's not the exception. And Jesus chose traumatic means. I mean, you think about, he's in a falsely accused trial, right? So if Trump was indicted, if Trump's indictment is an injustice, or there's systemic racist injustice against black people, what about Jesus? This dude didn't do nothing wrong. So you get a trial that's unjust, right? You get a crown of thorns put on his head. He gets his back brutally ripped open, right? He's carries 100-pound wooden beam up this hill that's so heavy that he's stumbling, that they have to get Simon of Cyrene to help him carry it. He lays down on this wooden beam with his back ripped open, right? And then you allow these men to put nails into your skin, and they hoist you up, and that your lungs are crushed. The way you die is by asphyxiation on the crucifixion. Jesus chose that, though. There's a difference between this happened to them. Jesus chose to suffer and chose to allow evil to impose itself on him. So if God would allow his own son to experience evil and suffering, why wouldn't he allow his other children to? And I think the reason why I think this is a better way to get at it for those who are not antagonistic and those who believe is because when we're thinking about evil and suffering, we always exclude the cross, right? No one is complaining about God allowing Jesus to be punished for us. Most people don't walk away from Christianity like, man, I can't believe that God would allow his innocent son to be punished and brutally beaten and crucified for me. I'm walking away from the faith. Most people disconnect that Jesus chose evil and suffering as well. And don't get me wrong, don't take my words and try to twist them. It wasn't evil, and it wasn't, he knew what he was doing. This was God's redemptive plan, but from the outset, he could have chosen a much milder way to die, and he chose the most extreme way. So even God allowed his son to suffer and be given over to the hands of evil men is where the evil and suffering comes from. We have to remember that. Like he allowed evil and suffering, but he didn't just allow it for us. He also allowed it for himself. And that, to me, if there was no crucifixion, then I would have a lot of problems with the way God does things. I would struggle with some things. And I do still. We all do. Let's keep it 100, right? But because Jesus chose to suffer, be turned over to the hands of evil men, mistreated, all of that, so that I could be saved, so that my suffering, that suffering is far greater than mine, whether we believe that or feel that way or not. And the fact that God chose to suffer and chose to experience evil that I'll never experience. I mean, let's just be clear. Many of us are not going to be raped, kidnapped, whipped, beaten, crucified. We're not going to experience the things. We're not going to be falsely accused that much. We're not going to experience those. There's a lot of people that do, but there's a lot of us that aren't. And so when we think about evil and suffering, we're really saying, why is God allowing some things to happen in the world that don't make sense to me? And I would say, there's no good answer for that. But the solace that I have is that he also chose to embrace that evil and suffering as part of his own experience. When he came back from the grave, remember Thomas was like, man, I don't believe he's alive. Show me the holes in his hands and his feet. Remember, he showed up and said, greetings, Thomas. Here are the holes in my hands, and here are the holes in my feet. And Thomas was like, my Lord and my God. And what did he say to Thomas? He said, oh, Thomas, you believe because you see, because I'm physically here. He said, blessed are those who do not see me physically and still believe. And that's us, right? So again, why does a good God allow evil and suffering? If it's someone that's antagonistic and just trying to show you why Christianity is stupid, Then ask them, well, what do you believe in? And when they say what they believe in, then say, well, why haven't what you believed in stopped evil and suffering? What's a better answer that science has if you believe in science? Well, what does Allah say? Or what does Buddha say? Or what does Shiva the Destroyer say? There's no one going to give you a better answer than the Bible. So don't fall into the trap. But when it's someone who genuinely is struggling and really wants to know, remind them that, listen, what you're going through is tough, but God also allowed evil and suffering to happen to him. So he wasn't exempt from it, and so we're not going to be exempt from it in this life. Take it for what you want. I know in the comment section we like to be theologians and debate. What about this and what about that? Get a YouTube channel and debate it yourself. Having said that, the last level of evil and suffering that I want to mention would be this. If you have not streamed this album, that is Evil and I Am Suffering, because this is the album. And I am trying to be the best YouTube pastor, rapper. Prove me wrong. Streaming everywhere. Go pick this up. Thanks for riding. Thanks for hanging out. For all the new subscribers that came from the Homie Rules line. Appreciate y'all. We're going to talk about something tomorrow. We got to talk. But I'm going to say that for tomorrow. All right? Grateful for y'all. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.